Greetings, friends. Why am I speaking like I'm officiating a wedding? Oh boy, you gotta get used to being on video and not having as many cuts as you do in audio, Chris. Speaking of video, I want to thank everybody, first and foremost, before we get any further into today's episode, about the comments on last week's, on Cropsy, on the video format. Thank you all so much. I didn't think so many people would be so thrilled to see me, which, I don't know. Thank you. It's flattering, I guess. Like putting a face to the voice. A lot of you were like, oh, wow, I didn't expect your face. Well, that voice coming out of that face is probably more what they were saying. Oh, anyway, as you can see, my background has changed. Those of you watching, I just kind of sat on the other side of the table. Yeah, I had, the table here and all these little knickknacks around. Most of these knickknacks are on that table. You would think I put them there to make like a creepy background, but no, those are just there. So yeah, I thought that would be much more fun. My ideal situation is to be outside in front of a fire while I do the recording, but the logistics of that is proving to be tricky. Today's episode is about a topic that I am familiar with, that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with based on its popularity in the pop culture zeitgeist. You could probably tell by the topics that I'm picking things that are familiar, things that'll be easier to talk about instead of, scripting everything like I normally do. These are the kind of things that I could just rap with and have a conversation about, and a one-sided conversation, which is a lot trickier than you'd think it would be. If I was talking with someone, which might have to bring back my wife to be a co-host if I'm going to be more of this casual kind of thing. At least once a week, maybe do 2 episodes a week, 1 episode like this and 1 episode like the Folklore Fireside, so I can focus more on folklore around the world. Is that something that people would like? Let me know, please. Yeah, so let me just get down to business. I'd like you all to gather around and prepare yourselves for one of the most infamous haunted house stories in America. This is the tale of the Amityville Horror. First things first, let's rewind back to November 13th, 1974. A seemingly ordinary night in the sleepy town of Amityville, New York. A lot of people ask me, like, oh, did you live over there? Like, people who aren't from New York, and when I'm on, like, people who I speak to after doing the show, and when I say I'm from Staten Island, a lot of people think that, like, Staten Island and Long Island are almost the same, but they're not. They couldn't be even more different. So, just want to put that out there. The seemingly ordinary sleepy town of Amityville, New York turned into an absolute nightmare. Ronald DeFeo Jr., a man of only 23 years old, did the unthinkable. He murdered his entire family while they slept peacefully in their beds. Now, as you can imagine, a horrific event like this sent shockwaves throughout the nation, and it captured the attention of nationwide media. But this was really only scratching the surface, because as the details of the case emerged, including DeFeo's claim that voices in the house drove him to commit these murders, it became even more chilling. And despite his defense, DeFeo was found guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison.
Today, police combed the DeFeo's handsome 3-story house for clues while divers explored the backyard swimming pool for the still unfound murder weapon. Police have been questioning the son, Ronald, and now say he is being, quote, safeguarded.
What about Ronald DeFeo, the son, the surviving son?
Ronald is being safeguarded by the Suffolk County Police at this time because there's 6 members of the family dead, and we don't know why, and he's the sole remaining member.
Is he also a suspect?
He's not a suspect at this time.
Now, the infamous DeFeo murders left a dark stain on the house at 112 Ocean Avenue. A stain that would soon engulf its next residents, because little did they know that when they were moving in, they were about to enter a living nightmare that would really shock and terrify not only the nation, but the world. In December of 1975, the Lutz family, George, Kathy, and their 3 children, excitedly moved into their new home, a beautiful Dutch colonial house sitting in Amityville, Long Island, with 6 bedrooms, a swimming pool, a boathouse. It seemed like the perfect dream home for them. And at a bargain price of only $80,000, they couldn't believe their luck, which is a price that I say this a lot when I talk about real estate on this show. When home prices come up, it is nauseating what a home will go for today. I'm one of those people who got in their home at the right time. I was looking for a home in late 2020. I was going through, this is when the mortgage rates were at so much less than they are now. And I got into a home, which it's a blessing and a curse, because now it's like we've been looking around to maybe kind of relocate to somewhere else, maybe. Depending on, like I said, I still do have a day job, so depending on how the podcast goes and the way my day job is kind of working out, I've spoken about it before on how it's a little touch and go there right now. So we've been looking around, but then it comes back to the interest rate. It's like, oh my God, for what we have and what we could sell for, but the interest rate, even though the house is falling apart and my HVAC went, I have a porch that's beautiful, but it's part of it's collapsing. And it's just, is it worth the upkeep? Might as well just me. I'm a guy who's like, pack it up, let's go. But no, I do have a lot of sentimental attachment to this house, and it would be tough to leave. Little did the Lutz family know that the house that they had bought, their dream home, had a dark history. Now, if I found out that this house had a dark history, I think that would probably influence my decision to get the hell out of here. Because, as a lot of you know, I'm not a brave person when it comes to monsters and ghosts. And if I started hearing voices, forget it. You can talk back. Are you crazy? Gotta get out of there. The previous year, the gruesome crime had taken place within its walls, and the Lutzes were not aware when they bought the house. I wonder if that's something that real estate agents have to disclose. I know there was like a website. I know like in Japan, that's a big thing. And there's a website for like real estate for sale that has like its haunted reputation and history and things like that. It's haunted American history. Yeah, so I wonder if they probably didn't. I mean, I know I wouldn't. If I was selling a house, I'd be like, no, that red stain on the floor is paint. Those handprints? Imagination. This house is a bargain. Almost immediately after moving in, strange things began to happen. And it started with their family dog. My dog acts very strange sometimes. Since we moved into this house, his whole personality has changed. I have a corgi, and he's a herding breed. And when we're in the house, like it's not like big. It's just 2 stories, but we were living in a ranch before this, a small ranch that we were renting. And he very much likes us all to be in one room. And when we're around in different parts of the house, I think he feels like this house is too big to wrangle everyone, and it makes him really anxious. So all he does is just pant and bark and just hates every single one of us. Anytime we leave, if we're in the room together, he's good. He'll just lay down and be. But once one goes one way, one goes the other, he just goes back and forth and just yells at us. So it's interesting. Right now, though, he's quiet because my wife's not home. Again, I told you I send my family away when I record. When I'm not home, he don't care. But as soon as she leaves, very concerned. Watches out, make sure she gets back. So the dog Harry, who refused to enter the house, had to be dragged inside. No, my dog doesn't like to go outside. He does, but as soon as he comes, like, my whole back door is destroyed with claw marks from him. As soon as he goes out, he does his business and right back inside and scratches the door. You would think I learned to stay by the door and wait, because I know he's going to instantly come back and not give him the opportunity to scratch it, but I'm a fool. Once they were all inside after they dragged Harry the dog in, they quickly realized that the house was not as idyllic as it had seemed. It had a life of its own, and it was filled with unexplained sounds that seemed to echo through the halls. Strange odors began to appear out of nowhere and sudden cold spots. Now, I know I talk about that all the time when it comes to hauntings. Those are like the check marks of every kind of haunting. You got a cold spot, you got a smell, and you got sound. You gotta go. That's Chris's motto. Needless to say, the Lutz family's dream home quickly turned into a nightmare that they found that they could not escape from. George became obsessed with the basement. I don't have a basement. Problem solved, Chris. Down there, he felt an unsettling chill that never seemed to go away. Which most basements I guess they're kind of chilly. Kathy Lutz started experiencing terrifying visions and seeing ghostly apparitions throughout the house. One of these apparitions was of a young girl whom she found out whose name was Jody, who had glowing red eyes. But it wasn't just the adults who were affected by the haunting. The children also experienced strange occurrences. They talked about invisible friends and claimed to see shadowy figures lurking in their rooms at night. The youngest daughter, Missy, even developed an imaginary friend named Jody. But it wasn't the same one that her mother saw. Missy described her friend as a demonic pig with glowing red eyes, not a little girl. And if that wasn't disturbing enough, the entire family's personalities began to change. George became increasingly aggressive and distant, while Kathy grew more terrified and withdrawn. Now, little did they know, this was only the beginning. The Lutz family was at their wits' end. The strange occurrences had started to plague them since the day they moved in, and they didn't have any kind of explanation for it. They could not explain what happened. They had no warning. They didn't do any kind of research on what happened in the house before them. Does anyone do that? Or am I the only strange person? That anytime you're going to visit somewhere, like you Google and like the address and put like news next to it to see if there was any kind of horrific event that took place in the place you're going to. I do it anytime I go to anytime I travel, or if I'm going to a hotel. It's like, you ain't getting me, hotel ghost. If there was a murder on the 5th floor when I check in, like, put me on 2, please. Put me on 7. You put me on 5, I'd be very unhappy. I'm taking a pillow, I'm doing something. The family was desperate for answers, as you can imagine. So they turned to a local priest, Father Ray, to bless the house and hopefully stop all the disturbances. Now, as Father Ray began his ritual, he suddenly heard a chilling voice, a commanding voice that shouted to him to get out. Now, as you can imagine, a voice that materializes out of thin air that screams to get out? He left immediately. Good. Father Ray has a head on his shoulders. The rest of the family should have been single file out of the house behind him. And he warned the Lutzes that something truly evil was lurking within their home. And he urged them, he pleaded and begged for them to leave as soon as possible. But even after the blessing, even after the warning, the Lutz stayed. And the hauntings only grew more intense. Doors now started to slam shut without explanation. Foul odors would permeate in the air. Green slime would ooze from the walls. The family reported hearing eerie sounds of a phantom marching band, and they even witnessed hooded figures moving through their house. It seemed like no matter what the Lutzes did, the presence in their home only grew stronger and more vicious. The Lutzes finally came under the realization that they had to get out of there before it was too late. Yeah, you think? Yeah, no, get out. It only took 28 days for the Lutz family to reach their breaking point. 28 days. Can you imagine doing anything uncomfortable for 28 days before saying, you know what, guys, maybe we got to pack it up? 28 days of anything. That is insane. That's a month. That's February, sir. You took the entire month. Your family was tortured. A priest ran out of your house. You had a ghostly marching band running up your wall. How do you explain the green ooze? Where'd that come from? What is this, Nickelodeon? Is Mark Summers running around your living room?
On your mark. Get set. Go!
What's wrong with you? Get out of the house. 28 days. Can't believe it. That took that to reach their breaking point. What? I mean, laying in bed at night, and you hear like, and you see like ghosts walking around and green news. It's like you won the sweepstakes. Maybe they were just trying, maybe they weren't so bad. Maybe they were trying to like celebrate with them, because it sounds like they were on Double Dare. And maybe they were trying to give them a prize. And the ghosts got really annoyed at that they weren't catching on. So they're like, listen, this guy, they ain't getting it. They ain't getting the prize. Let's just make him kill his whole family. In the dead of night, they frantically gathered what few necessities they could and fled from 112 Ocean Avenue, leaving all of their belongings behind. The house had become a living nightmare now, plagued by an unexplainable evil that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. What kind of ghostly gift would they give you? What would that be like?
After these messages, we'll be right back.
I like how I just look off into the distance. What's funny is that I forget now that I'm being recorded. So, like, me looking into the distance after that thought popped in my head is something I would actually just do if this camera wasn't on. And I find myself doing that often at home. My wife's like, what are you thinking about right now? I'm like, I just stare longingly into the distance with my thoughts. Boy. So without looking back, they decided to leave their once beloved dream home and never return. It was a decision fueled by pure fear and desperation, one that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Now, after the Lutz family left, the infamous story of the Amityville Horror took the nation by storm. Everyone seemed to be talking about it, from neighbors gossiping over white picket fences to late night talk shows making jokes at their expense, and current podcast. The sensation of this story started as a best-selling book written by Jay Anson in 1977. The book was based on interviews with the Lutz family, and it presented their supposed experience in the haunted house as factual events.
6 people were killed in an awful mass murder. God knows it's got to be awful, in a small town on Long Island. The town is called Amityville. The murders took place in this house. 1 year later, George and Kathleen Lutz bought the house, and they moved into it with their 3 children. After living there for 28 days, they were convinced the house was possessed by some kind of evil force, and they left their belongings and they fled, and they were really terrified. The events that supposedly took place there during those 28 days have been put down in a best-selling book. It's called the Amityville Horror, and there is now a movie out, or about to come out, of the book. George and Kathleen Lutz are with us this morning to talk about what happened during those 28 days in Amityville. The book and the movie depict all these kind of weird, strange things that happened in the house during those 28 days when you were there. What kind of things, George, happened physically? What were some of the things that happened that scared you?
Well, at first, just moving into the house was fine. It's a lovely house.
Yeah.
And we enjoyed moving in. Within a week, Kathy's hand had been touched by something that we discussed and couldn't explain. It was just something unseen.
Okay.
We also had hordes of flies that would appear within 2 rooms. And no matter how many times we would kill them, they would reappear.
All right, now flies can be a real problem in this part of the country in the summer,
Sure.
in any house, you know.
But if you have 2 or 3 or 4 within 1 room, that could be commonplace.
And it
But
was
when
the
you're
winter.
talking over 100,
Well, this was the winter.
yes,
And you're talking about how many?
over 100 flies
Over 100
at
flies.
one time, and then you'd go around and kill them. They'd be lying on the floor. You'd come back an hour later, and they would be there, more of them.
Okay, there's
We
something
had-
about green slime. What was that? On the wall in the movie, there's green slime comes out of the walls?
On your mark.
As the movie did it, not exactly, no.
Yeah.
It was more of a gelatin kind of substance that we thought the children had somehow mixed something up and spilled it around the house. The next time it happened, the kids were at school, and there was just no way to explain how it got there.
As you can imagine, the book flew off the shelves and became an instant hit, only fueling people's fascination with the paranormal even more. Now, soon after, in 1979, the first film adaptation of the book was released, bringing the terrifying events of the Amityville house to life on the big screen. That's what solidified the house's place in pop culture, and even sparked more debates and theories about what really happened behind its walls. It was a wild ride that no one could seem to get enough of. The Amityville haunting captured the attention of many, including renowned paranormal investigators and Lorraine Warren. These two were no strangers to the supernatural, as we've talked about with the Annabelle episode. They quickly found that the house on Ocean Avenue was unlike any other case that they ever encountered. According to reports, Lorraine, who was the clairvoyant, was immediately struck by a powerful and evil presence in the house. She claimed to have seen a demonic figure lurking in the shadows and felt an overwhelming malevolent force that seemed to threaten anybody who entered the home. But not everyone believed their accounts. Skeptics, including investigative journalists and researchers, raised doubts about the validity of the events described by the Lutzes. Some even suggested that the story was a hoax, concocted for financial gain, obviously. Because if you're going to embarrass your whole life on national news saying that ghosts chased you out of your home, you might want to cash a check or two. In fact, it was the lawyer who had defended Ronald DeFeo Jr., the man who had murdered his family in the same house years prior, who came forward claiming that he and the Lutzes had made up the story over several bottles of wine. Now, if that's true, that's terrible. I mean, lawyers get a bad rap for being kind of slimy, but, the shoe fits, As more details emerged about the supposed hauntings, some people began to question why no paranormal activity had been reported by the now new owner of the house. One particular couple, Jim and Barbara Cromartie, who purchased the house later on in the late 70s, and they lived there for 10 years with no encounters of anything out of the ordinary. Now, this further fueled skepticism and actually led them to sue the Lutzes, the people they bought the house from. Led them to sue Jay Anson, the author of the horror book, and the publisher. Now, despite numerous investigations and debates surrounding the Amityville haunting, it remains one of the most controversial and talked about cases in modern paranormal history. Whether true or fabricated, it continues to fascinate and really terrify any of those who hear it. The Amityville Horror may have caused quite a stir, but it has also left a lasting impact on our culture. If you ever are bored, go on IMDb and just type in Amityville. The amount of Amityville movies that come up, it's insane. It's not just like the Amityville Haunting 1 and 2. There's one, I think, like the Amityville in space, and the cover is like the house on like an asteroid, which is something that I think it's on Tubi, which is something I'm very curious to watch, because that's got to be just an insane ride. Yeah, there are so many really crappy. Well, I don't know if they're crappy, because a lot of these crappy movies sometimes are really, really good. Well, not really, really good, but they're like guilty pleasure watches. So they might be one of them. I'm going to watch that Amityville Horror in space, though. That's coming up. If anyone wants to watch it, let's watch it and then talk about it. That'd be fun. No, it won't. It won't be fun for anybody but you, Chris. Never mind the books and the movies and the documentaries and this, that, and the other thing. What about the house itself? The house itself is now a popular tourist destination for those brave enough to explore its dark history. But beyond the surface level of fascination with the chilling story, the Amityville Horror has sparked a wider interest in paranormal. Suddenly, after that story came out, people were more interested in ghost stories and haunted houses. The media coverage of these supernatural occurrences increased, and it even shed light on the power of traumatic events and how they can leave an imprint on physical spaces, like the Amityville house. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, one thing is certain. The Amityville Horror left its mark on our society and continues to mystify us to this day. The media frenzy surrounding the Amityville story was, as you can imagine, astronomical. I wasn't alive during that time, but my parents say that it was like a big thing. My parents obviously grew up in New York, and they said when, after that movie came out, them and their friends made that trek out to Long Island to go check that house out. which was, a big part of growing up in our area during that time. Everyone I know who was alive, and my parents, aunts, uncles, all talked about it. Oh yeah, we went there. I mean, that's there. I don't know what's equivalent. Well, I guess it's equivalent to whatever the haunted location is of where you're from. For me, it was the Seaview Homes and the Willowbrook Institute. For them, it's the Amityville Horror. But theirs happened to be more famous. Bastards.
Comedies who bought the house have packed up and left, driven away by an onslaught of tourists and pranksters who still continue to come and gawk, not fooled by the now changed address out in front. Now, why did you come by tonight to look at this house?
To see what that book was all about and everything about the house, the way it looked, and all the things that people say about it.
Oh, we just wanted to see what it was like. I guess we just specifically came from Chicago to see it.
Well, do you believe all the stories?
Yeah, I do. They're kind of creepy. They gave me the creeps that...
Why do you believe it when the present owners say there's no truth to it at all, and they've been living here for almost 2 years?
Oh, I didn't know they had present owners. I thought it was deserted.
A man who said he was a friend of the Cromedies also came by, but insisted he not be photographed. You say a friend of yours lives here and you've been in the house. Is there any truth to all these stories that it's haunted and there are weird smells and slime and all those other things?
Nothing at all. It's all a bunch of lies.
Well, how do you feel about all these tourists coming by and the movie opening and all of this? What do you think of that?
Well, I live right down the road and it's a pain in the neck because you can't even get down the block.
But when we started rolling the cameras, I had no idea just how much of a pain in the neck it was for the man now temporarily living in the house. As Frank Birch and another man came to the porch, I walked up the driveway to talk to him. He refused and demanded I leave. I thought I did so fairly quickly, but apparently not quickly enough. Within minutes, a police car arrived, then another. Birch came out and told the police he was pressing charges, my crime trespassing. I begged for mercy. None was forthcoming. I was shown into a police car and driven to the Amityville police station.
The New York Times, even at the time, published multiple articles about the Lutz family's terrifying experience and the subsequent investigations by paranormal experts. But it really wasn't just print media. Local news outlets in Amityville jumped on the story, conducting interviews with neighbors, priests, anyone who had any connection to the house. And that wasn't just limited to newspapers and magazines. In 1979, Newsweek published an article titled The House of Horrors, which delved into Lutz's claims and the controversy surrounding them. The article featured interviews with the Lutz family themselves, as well as renowned paranormal investigators at Lorraine Warren. And they also interviewed any skeptics who cast doubt on the validity of their story. But perhaps most notably, television programs also aired segments on the Amityville horror phenomenon. In Search Of, hosted by Spock himself, Leonard Nimoy, featured a segment on the subject, bringing the story to now an even wider audience. This program aimed to present a balanced view featuring both the details shared by the Lutzes and the skepticism of those who researched their claims. But no matter how many debates and investigations happen, the legend of Amityville won't die. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue, or rather its new number of 108 to deter curious visitors, still captures people's imagination. It's like a constant reminder that there is indeed a thin line between reality and the supernatural. So as we sit here by this proverbial cozy campfire, it's important to remember that some stories are born from real events. They're not just made up to scare you. And the Amityville Horror is a perfect example of this. It shows us that our homes, our safe havens, can sometimes harbor darkness from the past. So when you get back home tonight, if you're listening to this on your drive, don't forget to take a moment to just listen and enjoy the silence around you. And if you hear a whisper in the dead of night, just remember the Lutz family and their terrifying ordeal in Amityville. Because really, who knows what's lurking inside their own walls? Folks, thank you so much for joining me. I'm Christopher Feinstein, and this is Haunted American History.